The question was about fundraising and the lessons learned from fundraising because it was such an integral part of XPRIZE and everything you did.
So it is probably one of the most critical skills that you can learn. I think of fundraising as energy transfer. It's going to someone and convincing them to give you some energy that you can go use to go and accomplish something. And I had a formative moment in my life, my sophomore year at MIT. I had started my first organization ever. It was called SEDS, Students with Exploration and Development of Space. And it's become a global student space organization. And I'd started the first chapter at MIT, and I needed $5,000 to print a newsletter and mail it out. And I went to Draper Labs, and I met with the head of Draper, and I knew they were profitable. They were nonprofit. They had money, and I was pitching them my heart out. Would you please? I need just $5,000. And he says, I'm sorry, we're a nonprofit. We cannot give money. What you're doing is great, but so I was walking out the door, and I stopped, and I said, well, could you instead print my newsletters? She said, sure, we got a whole printing facility here. I said, would you mail them? He said, absolutely. We probably got about $25,000 worth of printing and mailing from Draper over the years, that year and the following years. And it hit me that there is, whenever you go and you ask something, first of all, you have to ask. I mean, the first rule of sales is you have to ask. You have to believe in yourself and what you're doing passionately enough that you're willing to give this person the opportunity to help you or to be involved. And then you have to ask. And then you have to commit to yourself, I'm not going to walk away from having invested that time without something. It may simply be, why aren't you investing? What advice do you have for me to go and on my next call? Who can you introduce me to that does want to do this? And I think other thing I learned, a sage fellow, Al Kurth, taught me in my early days at XPRIZE. He said, when you ask for money, you'll get advice. And when you ask for advice, you might get money. And that stuck with me a long time. So I used to be extraordinarily impatient. Hello, what's your name? Can you give me some money, please? And I learned that that's not necessarily the best way. When people invest in you or in your project, they're investing in you. It's a transfer of confidence. So you really need to build a relationship with that person in a way that you touch their heart, they understand why you care about this, how it relates to them, and then they will naturally want to get involved. But I can't emphasize enough how important that is in a skill. If you want to go and do something, it's about convincing other people to join you, bring their technology, bring their money, have George invest in your company.
Yeah, it's amazingly true because we see it with entrepreneurs. Some of the best entrepreneurs, in the fundraising process, the fundraising is secondary to wanting to get groups of people involved. They don't show up and say, the calculation of how much money you're going to make is 4.7x over 3 years. They just don't do that. And a lot of people ask me and other venture people, how do you decide to fund something? What is the critical amount? What are the critical internal rate of return? I'm like, there is none. And some people say, well, how can there be none? I was like, well, we like to think, can we return 10 times the invested capital? But the reason why we say 10 times is really because the way we qualified in our heads is, can this generate a sufficient breakout that we're proud of our association, and it could also make money. But 10x is really just a qualifier. It's not really mathematical in the sense, and that always puzzles people. But it's actually the truth. You've said it the best out of anyone I've ever heard.
Thank you.